Hi, Future Elect. My name is Nkululeko Nkosi. I'm 28 from Katlehong. I hold a law degree. Currently, I am a regulatory risk manager in one of South Africa's leading banks. Before that, I was a policy analyst for the South African Reserve Bank. And before that, I served in a government capacity by way of the Financial Intelligence Center. Um, I also moonlight as a podcaster. Um, my podcast I will say used to because I've been on an indefinite break, but my podcast used to look at um, public policy, governance, current affairs, and political issues. Um, I also consult on political issues. I'm a speechwriter, an informal speechwriter for some of my peers that serve in government. Yeah, so I think that's basically it about me. And fearing that this video is going to be long, I think I'll just go to answering the questions that have been put to me. The first one being, why do I think, or why do I want to serve um, in a public office role, right? So I think there is nothing I would say that is particularly extraordinary about me that would, I can say to convince you that I'm the right person. But I think I'm an ordinary South African. I think it's the extraordinary times that call upon ordinary people to rise up and avail themselves to effect the sort of changes that they want to see. So there are there's a wide variety of issues that impact South Africans, and my solidarity with South Africans, communities that go through unspeakable horrors due to government failure, is what actually has pushed me to take a chance to avail myself and look at myself as part of a collective of people that want to change things. So I think South Africa's foremost problems are well known. I think it's well known that we have a poverty problem, we have an unemployment problem, we have um, a government spending problem, we have um, a violence problem. I think those are well those are well documented, and I think my my focus is around solving the most difficult of problems, being poverty. How do we deal with the issue of poverty, which trickles down into other micro issues, and micro not in the sense of their seriousness, but in terms of how they relate to the bigger question, which I believe is poverty and inequality in society, and that I believe breeds other small problems, such as crime, such as discrimination, such as unemployment. And I think once we address ourselves to figuring it out, I think we can then start addressing even issues that flow from the main cause of them. And I think there has to be a deliberate and a systemic approach to ending poverty. And what do I mean about a systemic approach? I think, um, given my history, I born and bred in Katlehong. Went to schools around here until I went to varsity, and all of that has come at the expense of the taxpayer. And while that would ordinarily be a great story to tell about government policy, to say that we've taken children through school and today they are taxpayers, they are less dependent on government. But I think my story, unfortunately, is an exception more than the norm. So I think once we put in place deliberate, outcome based public policy interventions, I think those interventions that are not dependent on the individual, the type of leader that is there at the time, but I think by deliberate and systemic interventions, I mean exactly that. I mean outcomes that are not dependent on the sort of leader that we have at the time, but I think the ethos and the sort of systems that we put in place will ensure that we approach a methodology that can survive a leader, a methodology that can ensure outcomes, a methodology that can address the most immediate and foremost of our problems. So I think I'm beholden to policy making, and I believe so much in policy making that I think that if we took public representation seriously as a country, if as MPs, as MPLs, as councillors, we actually took that those roles seriously, and the sort of impact that policy making, as an instance, um, has on addressing issues, I think we would be talking of different things. So I think really that's why I want to avail myself, because like many South Africans, I'm tired, and I'm looking forward to forming part of um, the solution, a solution of like-minded people, a solution of brave people who put their careers at risk, people who put their livelihoods at risk to avail themselves to serve others. And I, for one, I think I'm ready um, to avail myself wherever I am needed, and whatever and in whatever capacity. So yeah, I think that's the first question. The second question: where do I see my leadership journey taking me? I mean, 3 to 5 years from now. So, originally I planned on seeing what sort of opportunities I could take in the 2024 elections, and while I'm not too sure how that will work, but I, for one, think it's a fantastic opportunity for anyone to test themselves against other proposals that political parties have. So, 3 to 5 years from now, I can't guarantee what it looks like, what my journey looks like, but I know that it would be a journey nevertheless. Whether 3 to 5 years from now I'm a counselor, I'm a policy analyst, or anything, I think if I can be of service to the people of this country, I think that would be the greatest honor of my life. So let me go to the third question, asking me what is the biggest challenge hindering young people from taking up political and government leadership positions in South Africa. I think we have to understand that a majority of young people are poor, and I think a majority of young people perhaps do not feel as though um, government is necessarily for them. And I look at patriotism as a question of the country asking something from its citizens. And I think it's difficult to want to give something back to the country when people don't feel like the country has given them anything. So I think that's the first question. I think the second answer, rather, to this particular question is that I think if young people cannot afford to apply to universities, if young people cannot afford to buy themselves toiletries, if young people can't afford to sort out their lives in a manner in which they desire, I think that it's difficult for them to even imagine a situation where they can serve others where there is a lack in their lives. So I don't necessarily think that young people are aloof or young people are uninterested in public representation. I think public representation has been distorted in a way that the image looks as if the leadership or leadership positions about seeking the self or seeking or leadership being a virtue in and of itself. So I don't think that there's even a great example for young people to follow in terms of wanting public representation. So I think if young people saw public representation as something that worked for them, I think then an example could be set for others to want to follow, for others to go beyond what previous generations have done. And I also think there's a limitation in terms of partisan politics. I think young people may very well prove me wrong and say that they are available. But I think the issues that come by way of partisan politics play a factor in how young people want to engage in politics. And I think the fees must fall era speaks to this, right? I think the fees must fall era shows that um, there can be a historical or or a big political event movement in the country that is not premised on one's participation in a political or in a partisan sort of setting. I think um, young people are also leaders in other ways that perhaps social media and um, other platforms are willing to recognize. I think when there are marches, I think young people are there. I think when they, in my community, for instance, we have patrollers here who, with the permission of the community, keep all of us safe. And most of the people that have availed themselves for that are young people. I attend community meetings, and my peers are there. So I think we should perhaps divorce ourselves from wanting to define what participation looks like, or limiting participation or expecting participation in the public policy or public discourse to look partisan. So I think young people are interested, and I think those who are not interested have good reason um, in terms of why they don't want to participate. And I think some may feel as though they've given up on this country specifically because the country has given up on them. So I hope I answered that question. I know my answer is a bit long. So let me go to the final question. Which area of public service am I most interested in? So I think I am luckily I've had some experience in policy making, but in a focusing on a niche sort of topic, the financial services. And even where I work, my role basically is to ensure that financial customers are treated fairly in terms of legislation. Previous to this, some of the initiatives that I was part of were looking into other issues like your financial inclusion. How do we make sure that underrepresented groups and communities are able to take advantage of all the financial products and services? So, because of my experience, I think I have mainly looked at one day serving as the DG in National Treasury. Um, but obviously, I mean, life is quite a volatile journey, so I can't say for certainty how my activism will look like or how my participation in the public discourse will look like. Because equally, in as much as I feel I'm ready to leave, I feel I am also ready to be led, because I don't think leadership in this regard requires um, strongman politics, or leadership that is individualistic. So I would like to see where the journey takes me. Um, I think if one had asked me when I was still a student activist where I would be in the next 5 years, I couldn't have imagined where I am currently. So I think I'm excited for the journey forward, and I'm excited to serve South Africans wherever I am, whether I'm elected or not elected. But I look forward to doing good. I look forward to being an activist wherever I am. And I think, lastly, I think leadership that is premised on the collective is strong, because as an individual, maybe sometime our individual activism doesn't matter. But I think that is why collectivism is so important, because we can't not matter, all of us at the same time, right? So I think it's very important to also allow room that maybe as an individual I'm not supposed to lead, or must be led elsewhere. So that's why I think, or I've premised my answer on the collective effort, and I've premised my answer on saying my activism won't stop um, just because I'm not elected into a position. But I think the next 20 years of my life, I would like for them um, to be ones of service, outcomes, achieving outcomes that are set up in various policy documents, such as your NDP. So yeah, I think that should be the end of it. So yeah, if you've listened until this long, thank you. And yeah, that's it for me. Thanks.